Welcome, everyone, to Music Junkies, a podcast about people sharing extraordinary stories about how music has impacted their lives.
Welcome, everyone, to Music Junkies. I'm your host, Annette Smith. And today our guest grew up in a musical family, started playing classical music at age 8, which is so impressive. You know, you had a dream to be on stage and you worked hard. In 2018, you produced your first album. Duke has won numerous awards for his music and performance. And, you know, the pictures that I've seen of you, and then obviously I see you live now, you just have a beautiful smile. So please help me welcome Duke Charelle to the show. And I'm excited. And it's so crazy that you're like pulled off to the side of the road and we're going to do this show and it's super fun. And I'm excited to have you here and go through your playlist and learn a lot more about you and our audience to learn a lot more about you and your music and what you love and what you don't love.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having me on.
So what was your first song that you learned to play on guitar since you started at 8?
So when I started playing music, I started playing I was playing clarinet. I was a classical clarinet player. And then when I switched over to guitar, the first song we started working on was Purple Haze, and it was Jimi Hendrix, because a bunch of my friends were into guitar at the time. And when I got a guitar, my buddy, whose name is Jelani, but we call him Brandon, had started collecting vinyl. And so we would sit down and listen to vinyl in his basement. And he started playing the Are You Experienced album. And so I went and got, when I got the guitar, I started learning Jimi Hendrix's Are You Experienced. I started learning Purple Haze.
So you just went for like the hardest guitar player ever to learn how to play guitar.
Yes. I think because I had played classical music so young, I understood how to read the rhythm. And so I could start working out the rhythm to some of the harder parts. And I just started playing from there. I would learn his songs. I would try to analyze the chord progressions. And then I went from that to like Stevie Ray Vaughan, and then Led Zeppelin, and then STEVE VAI and Joe Satriani. And I just started going down this long rabbit hole of like guitarists and
amazing guitarists, and obviously challenging guitarists as well.
Yes, extremely. I think that's like part of the fun, because you know I like a little bit of a challenge. I like something that pushes me a little bit. And the other thing too is when I listen to that there's so much that's going on in all of these styles, even though they're all stylistically different. You know, one was the birth of modern rock and arguably fusion music. And then one was just strictly blues, and the others are like virtuoso players. One who happened to be like in a bunch of 80s hair metal bands and Frank Zappa. So you get like sort of this like sort of gamut. But I think it's good to have something that's challenging, because it sort of expands your palette and your understanding of sound. And so
that's right. You must have sore fingers growing up.
After a while, when you start figuring out how all of it's placed, you don't really start to feel it. You don't. Once you start to get comfortable with the instrument, you don't really get soreness per se. I mean, you can definitely feel when you're playing, but if you're relaxed, you won't have any indication of soreness. But starting off on all of that definitely was difficult because you're still building calluses.
That's right. Start with your first song. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. So Tantric Dance, great song. I love the songs that you sent me. Amazing, obviously very funk and hip, and I love them. And it was just, it's such a nice change, I guess you could say. It's a nice change from what I'm usually sent. So does that song bring up a memory, or is there a story behind that song?
Yeah, so that was I would say about a year and a half, 2 years into playing music. Or playing guitar. When I started playing the guitar, um I had I was out with a bunch of friends, and one of their friends and I had sort of grown. We had sort of a bit of a sort of like tension between us, and we ended up spending the night together that night after the bar. And I didn't live too far from the restaurant where I was working at the time, and so I would walk back from the restaurant after being dropped off there, and a hawk was flying in the sky, and I looked up and I saw the hawk flying in the sky, and I started to hear the chords in my head. So I went home and I grabbed the guitar, and then I figured out the chord progression. I think I wrote the verse, and then I sat down and wrote all of the song, all the lyrics before I went into work, and then came back and wrote the rest of the song.
Wow, so you were inspired by a hawk.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. That's awesome. Do you remember your first concert that you ever been to?
Um, Man, there's so first concert. I've been to a lot of concerts, but I think the first concert that I ever really attended, um, where I wasn't performing, was actually Joe Satriani.
Oh, wow.
So
First
in
concert.
high school, yeah, in high school, I had a buddy of mine whose name was David Quinn, and Joe Satriani was coming through Ann Arbor. He stopped at the Michigan Theater, and my buddy David, as a surprise, called me up one day while I was practicing, and he was like, "Hey, man, I have a surprise for you. I know how much you like Joe Satriani, so I signed us up to be ushers so you can watch the show for free."
Wow.
So, we sat everybody at the concert, and then we got to sit down and watch the concert. And so we ushered everybody out. And that was like the first concert, and I worked it. It was volunteer, but it was really cool. And at the time, I was getting really into a lot of instrumental guitar players. And while I do like songs with vocals and lyrics and singing, there's just something different about instrumentals and the vocality that people can bring out in their playing. And Joe Satriani was one of my favorites. He just had like a quirky sensibility with his timing and rhythm, and it always just just had such an attitude and character about it.
That's an amazing story. I love the fact that, you know, obviously he was somewhat of an idol, and then you go and work it, and then you go see it free. What a great friend to get you set up with that. Is that guy still in your life? Is he still getting you into free shows?
Yeah, it was awesome.
I love that. That's awesome. Oh,
The last time I saw him, he was in Ann Arbor. He's in Colorado now. Lives in Colorado. But
nice.
we still speak to each other through the same friend group, so we're still in contact.
That's good. All right, next song. So Cosmic Vines.
Yes.
Great tune.
Thank you.
You have a story with that song?
You know, when I wrote this whole first album, because it's off the first album, and Cosmic Vines, I was sort of retooling a bunch of the songs and the project and what I was doing. And I just one day got bit by a writing bug. I sat down and I wrote like 3 or 4 songs back to back. And Cosmic Vines was one of those songs. And I think at the time, the earthquake in Japan had just struck. And yeah, it was 2000. That was going into 2011. The earthquakes in Japan had just struck, and it had leaked a lot of the radiation into the ocean. And with all that type of pollution taking place, and um, thinking about that sort of waste going into the ocean, I started writing a song about the destruction of Mother Nature. That's sort of what came out.
Yeah. So are you an environmentalist advocate? Is that like part of your DNA? You want to protect the environment?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm an advocate, but I take it under the stance that this is currently where we reside, right? And you don't want to sort of destroy where you live, because the chances of you expanding past that sometimes are difficult, if not virtually impossible. And you're a part of that said environment. So you being a part of that environment would be that you mean that you would be affected by that said environment. So it would make more sense to take care of the sort of your surroundings and make sure that those things won't have sort of a detrimental effect on yourself, which in the case of waste like that could be health and
Yeah.
food sources. So I think that it's very important to not necessarily have to be an activist about things, but speak on the fact that there is something that could be detrimental to all of us, because I don't think that individuals realize how heavy that can weigh. I mean, you are what you eat. And when you're talking about waste like that going into the ocean, it's into fish. That means, we can ingest some of that ourselves. So
Yeah.
it's more beneficial to understand that, and sort of
Yeah.
seeing that happen in a span of events. I thought that it was important to speak about.
Yeah, I think so. And it's like generally just don't pollute, right? It's going to come back to you.
Yeah, exactly.
Pollute twice. We already pollute ourselves enough. So why go and pollute around us where we can pollute ourselves twice, right? Just doesn't make sense. So tell me a little bit about how you grew up. Like what kind of house environment did you grow up in? Lots of music,
So
like lots of support from your family when you were starting at a young age.
yeah, so when I was younger, I lived with my mom, and we were on a military base in Nebraska, and so I started music really young. It was stage and plays. I think when we were in kindergarten, all the little kindergarten plays where you'd sing all the musicals, and there was a lot of support in that, and I went from that in kindergarten to joining band. They make everybody play their quarters, and then fifth grade, I think the third grade, when they actually let you pick an instrument, it was like percussion, saxophone, clarinet, and I was thinking about doing percussion because I like the xylophone, but and the saxophone sounded cool, but I decided to choose the clarinet. And then I played clarinet until eighth grade. I was first chair every year uh, until eighth grade. My moved to Michigan to live with my father because my father lives in Michigan, and that's where I was born. And I think I took 2 years off of music when I moved up here because I started doing a lot of sports. I was doing sports and music at the same time. And so when moved up here, I was doing a lot of sports, and their policy was you couldn't do music in sports because of where the seasons might line up. And about this time, I had decided to switch to guitar. Now, in the eighth grade, I was playing jazz bass because our school on the military base had a jazz program. They had just introduced it. And so then when I moved with my dad here, my sophomore year of high school, I got a guitar. And then I had started playing guitar from that point on. I just took everything I had learned from classical music when I was younger and then just started applying it to the instrument. And,
Yeah.
and then that
What were
was like,
what were you like in high school? Like what kind of kid were you in high school?
I knew a lot of people. Uh, I think people would think it was funny because I knew a lot of people. I talked to a lot of people in the school, but I never went anywhere. So I like to like when I would go home, I might go out every once in a while, but most of the time I would be in the house playing guitar. And that's what I liked to do was just play guitar. So I would just stay at home and play guitar.
That's
And
okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Look at where it's brought you, right? All right, your next song.
play guitar and read. And that's pretty much what I would do. That was
So Secret Lover. I'm sorry, Duke. It just keeps on kind of going in and out with connection a little bit. So I hear you coming in and then I hear you coming out. So sorry that I cut you off there. I thought you were done. So the next song that we just played was Secret.
It's all right. No worries.
Yeah. Okay. So you got to have a really good lover story for this song then, if it's a secret lover.
No, actually, not at all. This song was written in a shower.
Oh.
So I was trying out singers because I wanted to have sort of a male female dynamic in the vocals. I always like that because it's different types of dynamics. And while I can sing and play, sometimes it's cool to have another vocalist on and, sort of play lead behind like their vocal improvisations, like the old Led Zeppelin thing, like the call and response thing. And I was trying out a singer at this time and I had her come over because I had heard her voice and I sat down and we were talking and I started playing the guitar and I actually sang the melody because I had the melody for the song. So I sang her the melody and then we just started sort of coming up with an idea.
Oh, interesting.
And originally was having her sing, and she has since had a kid. So I sang the song on the record, but that was a song that I actually wrote in the shower, just having the music. And then we came up with the lyrics to try to theme it to be a song that a female lead would sing.
Oh, so you've never had a secret lover before then?
I mean, I have, but that wasn't but that wasn't what spurred this. That wasn't what spurred the song. I was just singing it in the shower at the time. So, so that one's a little less exciting of a story.
Well, you could spruce it up by telling us your secret lover's story.
Well, I mean, that was sort of the first song.
How would your friends describe you?
um, that's sort of different. I don't really think about that too much, but if I had to think about that, I mean, I think some of them would think I'm witty, um, I'm focused, uh, really creative and artistic. Um, I would probably start there. Yeah. I have a lot of sarcastic friends, and we crack jokes at each other all the time, just in greeting. So
I love that. I love sarcastic. That's good. That's a good quality to have. I'm super sarcastic too. So that's a good quality. All right. Next song.
yeah.
Compulsions. Okay. There's got to be a really good story for this song, I tell you, just by the name.
Yes. So in college, there was an associate of mine who let a girl move into his house, into his apartment. And I guess she had been having a hard time and was a recovering addict. And he thought that keeping her around keeping her around would be good to try to keep her clean. And one day I went over there, probably about the end of a semester, because I would go to when I was in college, when I was at Eastern, I would go year round. So I'd go year round through the summer. It was towards the end of the summer semester, and I went over there, and he had told me that he had to kick her out because she ended up relapsing and stealing, like, I think it was like around 500 to close to $1,000. It was quite a bit of money, and I started reflecting back on that, and so I wrote the song from the perspective of somebody who was going through that type of issue or situation, not having going through that myself,
Yeah.
but self as trying to put my shoes in a person who was recovering and relapsed. And so, I mean, it was a bit of an exercise in stepping outside of myself for a song a song, but the overall situation that inspired it was pretty drastic. And it's interesting. Like, some people succeed, and some people fall into fall off the wagon when it comes to substances like that, and the damage that can be incurred along the way because of it. And so that's sort of what the song is themed off of.
Yeah.
That's the whole aspect of running away from oneself, and the self-destruction, and I tried to envision that for that. So
Yeah. Well, you did a really good job. So when you think of karaoke, you go to a karaoke bar, what would be like your go-to karaoke song? Like, you kill it, you love to sing it for the crowd.
Cult of Personality.
That's a great song. I love it. That's awesome. I was not expecting that at all. That's awesome.
Yeah, I love that song. They were an amazing band. Living Color
Yeah,
was absolutely incredible.
that is awesome. That is so awesome. All right, we're gonna do your next song. We're flying through these. All right.
All the things will lie. One look to see I'm lost in time. Those days will lie.
Quick galaxies. There we go. Great tune.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is a cool song. This was from a conversation.
Really?
Yeah.
And I love how the song just like kind of jumps right in. Like there's no, it's like, let's just go for it.
Yeah. I wrote this song. So we were in the processes of getting ready to record the first album, which was called Beyond the Magic Mirror. And I had 11 songs. And they were 11 songs. Some of them were songs I used to perform from before. Um, and then when I retooled the band, I had 20 songs that we played with that band, which we called ourselves Focus at the time. And out of those 20 songs, I chose maybe 5 of them to use on the solo project that I was going to do. I wrote all 20 of the songs and then decided to just use 5 of the ones from that one. And then I wrote the other 6. And a buddy of mine who was at my gig last night, actually, his name is Mark. And, I've known him probably since like 2008. Like we did a gig together. It was his first paid gig for rapping.
Wow.
And um, he he was getting a divorce from his wife and needed some assistance. And I happened to live near him at the time when he had called, and so I drove him to court. And he had another friend of his who was a PhD meet him at the court because we were going to vouch for him in the court proceedings. And while we were speaking, she said the line, "I feel like Mother Mary,"
Wow.
which is a part of the pre-chorus. And she was like a neuroscientist is her PhD. I found that really really intriguing when I heard that and heard that in the conversation because she was talking about her love of medicine and science. I found that really intriguing. And so after the court proceedings, when I dropped Mark off, I came back home and I started humming that melody. And then I wrote the song out in about an hour.
That's interesting. It does kind of contradict a little bit, like science, religion. It's just like it's a constant battle. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
To say
yeah,
something like that.
yeah. And I was sort of like intrigued by the fact that she used that as a comparison. I was like, interesting. Like, so it it turned into um it turned into a very very interesting and in-depth and intriguing conversation that I then went home and wrote the song about. And that song was that song in particular, I think in 2020, we were offered a chance by AMG to feature our song on a compilation. The compilation is called um, Hotline Miami Volume 3, which was a compilation of a bunch of different artists. And in June of 2021, it hit Billboard.
Oh, that's awesome.
It made number 22. And so it was I'm thankful that it hit hit the chart, but I'm even more intrigued because like the concept of what she was talking about sort of spurred a song like that. It's funny where you find little bits of inspiration from, because you never know when it's gonna strike and what it's gonna bring out. It just happens.
That's that's so true. What has been your favorite venue or crowd to play for so far in your career?
Um, we played a show in Fort Worth. Yeah, I not only do my project, I also play with the P Funk Outlaws and play as the lead guitarist. And we did, and I'm the music director. And we did we went to Fort Worth, just outside of Austin, last year for Juneteenth, and it was just a really receptive crowd. Everybody was really receptive, and I think in the middle of our break, they it was really cool because you could just sit down and chat with them like normal people. Just sit down and chat with them, and and it was just really awesome to sit down and sort of have that like rapport and just talk about regular everyday things and then play a show. then play the show. I sort of like that. They were like a really down to earth audience space to play for. That was really cool to get to speak with and get to know in between sets. Just
Do you have any
really,
rituals before your set? Like, do you gotta, you know, be by yourself? Do you have like a chant? Do you have to have like yellow Smarties before you go on stage? Do you have any kind of rituals?
no, no. The only thing I do before I hit the stage is I might warm up a little bit. I might just try to play something as fast and clean as I can unplugged, just to loosen up the hands a little bit. But so like a warm up, like a little warm up, I might do, but it's just like sort of improvising through the scale. And um, other than that, no, I don't really really have
Have you
anything.
seen any like weird kind of rituals?
Um, I know not anything weird. Like I know some people that I've performed with. They like to get a little loose before the show, so they might drink a little. Um, and I'd say that's more like the hip hop crowd. A lot of times when people are getting ready, they're just going and talking to the other band and watching the show and you
Yeah.
know preparing the game plan. So we haven't really seen any weird rituals.
I guess we're not in the 80s anymore, right?
Oh no, the '80s people were wild. They were wild.
That's, that's right. I love it. Next song. Foreclosure Lane. Is there a great story behind that song?
In about 2009, 2010, I believe everybody remembers the housing crisis that struck the world, right? And so a couple of months before the housing crisis struck, um, I had been working a second job while I was going to college. And this job had me speaking to an individual and he was like, well, the sort of way that it went, it's mentioned in both of the verses. He was like, well, you know, basically a sort of gentle way of saying I can't really do anything right now. And as I continued the conversation, he uttered the words, "The bank owns our money." Um, the house is being foreclosed on. They're taking the house, and I saw a kid walk up right behind him, and I was listening to him as he said this, and started walking to leave from that particular location to go home. And when I got home, um, I wrote down the two things that he said to me, and then I started writing that riff. And so I wrote the riff based off of the two things that he said to me, because it's like one of those moments that sort of shakes you, because you like, you wouldn't think about that happening, and then you're speaking to someone and you're watching them talk to somebody about the appointment, but then they can't complete anything with an appointment because of the situation in which they're in. And then a couple months later, the housing crisis happened, and that housing crisis shook the world. Actually, first it was United States, and then it was everywhere. It was everywhere else, and even looking to potentially start taking place again with the housing market. You know, it was and the interesting thing about it too is Detroit. The second verse, Detroit used to be one of the biggest cities in the United States. It was like the fourth biggest city in the United States. It's like 10 million plus people. Now it's like maybe around a million. And it's there's still a good amount of people, but it also looks sort of like a ghost town because there are parts that are just dilapidated and abandoned, and then you have a new housing crisis and like the urban decay ruin sort of set as like a backdrop. And I think the two identities of those sort of clashed when I wrote this, and sort of spun around the scene, like the stuff from the past and the present situation that had happened, which then turned into a massive crisis.
Look what's kind of going on now, right? For interest rate,
Yeah.
rate
Yeah,
hikes.
the hikes, you're looking at the makings of another housing collapse, because nobody can afford anywhere can afford to even get in a house, and everything is so disconnected from where they view middle class to be to from what it really is. And I just think that it's interesting that the way the song has aged, because I've looked at it from the one situation, and then all of a sudden it's expanded to what seems to be multiple crises that no one's ever really truly tried to fix. And I think that it's something that can sort of speak to it as a testament to something that we should really be looking at um, before it becomes completely out of hand and no one can do anything.
That's right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's kind of scary what's going on right now, and you're hearing about lots of people losing their homes, right? Which is not a good place to be. And it's really
Yeah.
sad. All right, next song. So Lost in Light.
Yes. that was a couple that was around the same time as the period where I was writing a lot. Because I'll work on pieces individually and craft them out and then think about different ways to take them. But sometimes I get into these spurts where I'll sit down, I just write like 5 or 6 things out during the day. And I'll finish something I was already working on and then write like 3 or 4 other things completely through. And Lost in Light was one of those songs.
And so now you're looking at, so it sounds like a lot of your music is written by conversation, just random stuff kind of coming into your kind of realm, when you're out and about, which is pretty amazing that you can take like a little tiny sentence that somebody says, or like, like you talked about earlier, the bird kind of flying through, and you can go and produce this sound, write the lyrics, write the music. It's pretty impressive. Like, that's very impressive to be able to do something like that. So what do you prefer? Do you prefer being in the band or doing solo, or do each of them kind of have, you know, you have a different love for each of those places?
So even with solo material, I would still probably do it in like a band format.
Yeah.
I think that it's there's a different and more interesting light that can take place in a band format, because in a band format you can get so um intricate into what each person is doing that you can start to do things to complement what the other player is playing, and you can have sort of a conversation, um and then all separate a little bit from what you're doing and the processes of it, as in the term of a band. When I used to play all the music solo, it was solo. So then I would have to play it completely through to completion of the song. And that leaves no room for any variance, that leaves no room for really exploration. Everything that you're doing based off the song is based off of what you have to do to accompany yourself individually. And with a band format, you can now expand on that. You know, I love improvisation, you know, and that's a thing I try to add a lot in the live shows. You know, like the recordings, I give like a version that's for recording. Then when we play live, I like to improvise. I might change a solo up a little bit at one point. I might improvise another section another way at another point. Um, and then I feel like a band sort of allows you to do that.
Yeah.
And and then if when I'm playing in a band where I'm not always consistently the face, which is also the cool part about the Outlaws, I get to do other things. Like if somebody like say one of the females singers starts singing, I can, you know, start to do a call and response with the vocal runs that they're doing. So it gives um a good balance,
Yeah.
because I think you have to know how to be able to be in front and be the songwriter and be the performer, but you also have to know how to step in that piece, and should be able to switch in and out of those roles at any point in time, sort of seamlessly without having to have anything sort of attached to it. So it sort of allows for the music to speak for itself and the performance to speak for itself, and sort of remove all the other sort of thoughts out of the way.
Yeah. It's like telling a story.
Yeah, exactly. That's the end goal. The
Yeah.
end goal is to tell a story. So
Yeah. I agree 100%. So are you single, dating, on Bumble? What's going on in your love life?
um I like to keep that part private.
Yeah. Well, if you were single, then we could kind of, you know, explain what you're looking for. Maybe somebody we could find
No,
you a date, maybe.
no, I like to keep that sort of part private and to myself, you know, because you know when you get into certain things, sometimes people can pry into things. I like to keep those things sort of private. That that uh, that
Don't want any of your secret lovers' names to come out, right? We don't want any of that.
well,
Yeah.
sometimes people have a tendency to meddle in things,
That's right.
and so I like to I like to have the performance thing and be personable, but have certain aspects not not have them going into certain aspects where they can mess with
That's
things.
right. That's okay. All right, next song. We're getting down to the end.
Stop hurry, breathe out. Gather mind and gravity, quick gain composure. Lost in
And trees, right? So now we're totally on a different album, which is kind of cool. And I feel like a really different sound as well.
Yeah, I try to do different sounds and try to do different things. And with this album, like the first album was I wrote the collection of songs, and I've always felt that when you're trying to put a project together with people, there's two ways to go about it to make it really easy, and also promote like an organic development and sound to where you become your own sound, because everybody has a way that they play, and you need to introduce them to the way that you play and structure things, and then you listen to how they structure things while you're playing, and then you can start to come up with a whole original sound. So the first album was everything I wrote, and I wrote it all by myself, um, with because when I was retooling after the Focus band, um, I decided to sit down and write all the songs, and so I wrote all the parts out. Um, I have thought about organizing some of the bass parts, and then I spoke with Dean Raglan, who's one of the drummers from Funkadelic. I was introduced to him through Maruga Booker, who is also one of the drummers from Funkadelic and has quite an extensive record. His son Aaron linked me up with Dean, who then linked me up with Greg and these and who is the bass player. And I got a lot of the musicians after most of the music was formed. So I sort of
Yeah.
showed them the ideas and guided them through the ideas, and we just recorded the first album to get sort of that out. With the second album, while I still like craft my chord progressions, I start listening to a lot of what they're doing a little bit more, and so I start trying to write the chord progressions out and the songs out with how they style things in mind, and that gives a little bit more room and growth for a change in sound. I think for this one, I also wanted two guitar players who were sort of playing lead. Rodney Todd plays guitar with us as well, but I grabbed a buddy of mine by the name of Dumni DePorres, who played with Funkadelic in the '90s during the Prince era when they were dealing with Prince, and also played with Public Enemy and a variety of other bands. And asked him to do some of the lead work. Um, and on this song, it's really interesting. The verse chord progression is like a jazz chord progression, essentially. It's like a 2-5-1 in a jazz progression. Um, but I take it to some interesting chord progressions, and had Dumini play lead guitar on it to sort of color it, because
Yeah.
I was thinking about the lyrics, and I was like, Dumini and I could go trade off some lead work like we do in some of the later songs, was that then come together for us to be solo at the same time. And um but he played that lead, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna leave that lead as like the featured lead on that, and then leave my other articulations to the chords um as an additional rhythm track to just color the chords. So it made for a great advent that sort of brought together like a little bit of early jazz with like some fusion and some funk, and then more contemporary lyrics. So you're getting something sort of futuristic and a bit complex in harmony, that's still something that you could recognize as a regular chord change, um, into like a soul fusion pop chord change type thing. And this one was written um, it was sort of inspired by a month-long tryst I had with somebody a couple years back. so, so we put a lot to put a lot together for that, and just sort of breathed an original sound out of that.
Yeah, it's really cool. I love it. We're on your last song, but before I play it, I want to give you the opportunity to really just share where we can find your music. Obviously, we know the main platforms, but maybe you can give us your Instagram. Maybe you got some shows coming up and some certain you're touring. We'd love to be able to kind of promote you and get your name out there more. Obviously, that's who we are, and we want to be able to support you and your music.
Well, thank you very much. If you want to look for any of the music for Duke Charelle, you can find it on any of the online major retailers. You find it Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon. Some of the tracks are on Pandora, so you can stream it on Pandora. Any of the online major retailers, you'll find it. You just look up Duke Charelle. That's DUKECHARELLE, and you'll find it at any of the online major realtors. And the next shows that we'll be doing, I'll be playing with the Outlaws, the P-Funk Outlaws, at a mini funk festival that we're throwing on March 23rd, and then we'll be playing again with the Outlaws April 2nd, which is the Hash Bash in Ann Arbor. And then we have a show June 2nd. We're going to be in West Virginia playing for the mayor. And so we'll be doing a show. We're getting an award to present to somebody that is a part of the original Funkadelic lineup. And so we'll be doing a presentation with that. And it'll be televised. And then after that, we have a couple of shows coming up in June. One in Flint. It's going to be an outdoor venue. It's 400 people. If you go to dukecharellemusic.com, I'll have the flyer with the kind of book some festival events now. So there'll be more announced on the website.
I love it. Thank you so much, Duke. But before I let you go, can you please leave us with some words of wisdom?
Always be willing to accept change. Change is a viable thing for growth, and it certainly has helped me and my music and my creative drive. Always trying to approach things from a different angle. I feel like it makes me a better player at times, and it brings attention to things that I may not have paid attention to before, and it brings a lot of growth. And when you develop a healthy relationship with change, I feel like all things sort of prosper and grow with that, and you help build healthier relationships from that. I think that's a very important aspect to all endeavors, especially when you're doing something as vulnerable and naked as music.
I agree. That's great words of wisdom. Thank you so much, Duke, for joining us on Music Junkies today. I hope you had a good time. Next time, I feel like we need to do this again because of all the glitches and all the stuff that we had to overcome together today. Right. I would love to, sit down and interview you again 1,000% just for we can get the right spot for sure.
That would be awesome. And I was trying to have some of my band members join, and so we would get everybody speaking.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
One had an unfortunate incident. But I think the next time when we do this again, we'll get the full band on so everybody can speak.
That'd be awesome. Thanks for listening today. Hope you enjoyed the show. New episodes out every Monday. Please share with a friend and subscribe because you want to. And like me because you like me. Leave a comment so we can connect. And if you have a great playlist and you want to share, I'd love to have you on the show. please reach out to me on Instagram at the Music Junkies Podcast.